Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. The other day, I showed a video clip of a press conference given by war veterans led by Blessed Keza. And they were calling for Mnagagwa to give up this 2030 and attempt to amend the constitution to allow him to do so. Some people may have missed an earlier interview that our friend Blessed Geza had given, explaining what this is really all about. We managed to locate that interview, and here it is.
Yeah, I'm very much against it. I think from my last interview, now that this is bullshit. You know? This is bullshit. But you yes. Without you fighters. One way up in the state house. What does you normally? But you were two guys. Robert Mugabe was your guy. Ah, fuck off. Mnangagwa was you. When we say my war veterans, one day I looked at the yeah, one day, right? Our nationalists, don't tell my war veterans. You know? What's the difference? I'm not prepared. Are you against the 2030? Yeah, I'm very much against. I think from my last interview, now that this is bullshit. You know? This is bullshit. But you yes. Without you fighters. One way up in the state house. What does you?
So there you have it. All this hoo-ha was about making sure that the generation of the freedom fighters get into State House. Benjamin, welcome to the program.
Good day to you and good day to everybody. Thank you for joining us. Well, the battle lines are drawn and the knives and spears are out. They want a share of the action. I would like to start by saying, let it be known that Zimbabweans, the Zimbabwe political parties or organizations, they have never ever had a succession plan, be it ZANU-PF or the opposition. Mugabe, he wanted to die as president of the country. Morgan Tsvangirai died as president of his party. They both had no succession plan. And now you find everybody wants to have a stake or a claim to the hot seat, to the top seat of the country. This is the whole reason behind, this whole fiasco. It's not about the struggles of the people. It's mentioned, yes, but it is not the fundamental or the primary reason. The primary reason is there. The war veterans, they also want their turn, maybe as promised, to that seat.
I think what must be made clear here is that Zimbabwe is a failed state precisely because we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. Free, fair, and credible elections are not just a right, they are an essential component of good governance. The reason why the country is a failed state is we've been stuck with the same corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical ZANU-PF thugs for 45 years and counting. I think in 2017, when the military coup took place, people thought there was going to be change. They thought that those in power had finally realized that the system that they had imposed on the nation was not working. But it soon became clear that all they wanted was a change of leadership, the top dog. The Mnangagwa faction was fighting against the Mugabe faction for who should continue to rule the country. So the military coup of 2017 resolved absolutely nothing. It was just a musical chair. And while some people have praised Comrade Blessed Geza and his colleagues for taking on ZANU-PF regime, the Mnangagwa regime, on their present efforts to change the constitution to allow Mnangagwa to stay in. What people should understand now is that the real motive behind that interview was that they believe it is now their turn to have their own men as the president. It is laughable, of course, the way he has now become very selective. War veterans in Zimbabwe have been absolutely pivotal in maintaining, in establishing the ZANU-PF dictatorship and maintaining it in power. That is at the heart of the problem. And when we think of war veterans, sometimes some people make the mistake of thinking that the only war veterans are those who are not employed. There are war veterans in the army, in the police, in the CIO, in the prison services. Just that they cannot join the War Veterans Association while they are in gainful employment. But those security sectors, the war veterans in those security sectors have been pivotal. They played their full role in establishing the ZANU-PF dictatorship and maintaining it. And by the way, one has got also to add those war veterans who are in government. Our friend here is now trying to be selective and saying war veterans are those who carried the gun. The war is never fought by those in the front alone. Those doing the planning, the managing are just as important. And in this particular case, more so when you think that it was the war veterans who have kept Mugabe in power all these 37 years and then staged the military coup and imposed Mnangagwa. That is the problem with Zimbabwe. We keep recycling the same problem. That is what we have to address.
Here we must also say we are seeing the fruits of, or let me say the absence of democracy. I mean, what the elder here is saying is that, he is demanding that the war veterans should have a turn. Yet, under a democratic country, anybody is free to go into, an election and stand for president. And it is now up to the people to select whom they want. Do they want a war veteran? Do they want a youthful leader? Do they want, a technocrat? Or, the choice is all up to the people. It is not for the war veterans to demand, to say, we must also have a turn. So this actually just shows, that there is no democracy in Zimbabwe. Let it be known again that the only change of power that happened came through a military coup. It was a non-democratic process. In fact, it was a breach of the constitution that they also claim, that they are constitutionalists. They broke that as well when they ousted Mugabe by force. So Zimbabwe has never experienced any level of democracy at all. Now, this brings us to, unless and until we are able to hold free, fair, and credible elections where anybody or everybody has a chance, to be chosen by the people, to lead the people, Zimbabwe will remain a pariah state. And we will continue to see coup after coup after coup. This is a coup in the making. This is how it started for Mugabe to leave power. The war veterans were leading it, and they are the ones that chose the guy that is there. So they cannot cry foul. You brought it, right? So for me, really, the only solution to our problem is to try and find democracy, free, fair, and credible elections. That is the only solution.
Well, before I close the subject, I thought it would be fair for us to also mention that there was another interview by another group of war veterans. And this is the one where this is the official, as they called it, the authentic War Veteran Association of Zimbabwe. And in this interview, they emphasized and criticized Mnangagwa's moves to amend the constitution on the basis that ZANU-PF was amending the constitution because they had failed to produce a leader who could be competent to lead the party in 2028 and to complete whatever projects the party or Mnangagwa had started. And they pointed to the problem of the party's failure to produce competent successor. And they also pointed to the other veiled, unspoken plan of Mnangagwa trying to have a dynasty. I think that is a more valid argument and one which Zimbabweans out there should support. To support this faction of Comrade Geza, who only want another musical chairs is suicidal. We don't want to replace one dictator with another, as happened in 2017. What we want to do is to dismantle this canopy of dictatorship and produce and replace it with a really healthy and functioning democracy in which the rights and freedoms of all citizens are respected. The rule of law must be paramount. We have to snap out of this mentality that there are some people who have got the divine right to rule, much less divine right to loot. We cannot have a generation after generation having to fight for their right to have a meaningful say in the governance of the country. And the only time they can do so is by fighting the generation before them. And so we've got these endless cycles of yesterday's liberators becoming today's oppressors. And today's oppressors liberators become tomorrow's oppressors. We've got to break that cycle. When people went to war, and many of them lost their very lives, there was never any doubt that it was to grant all Zimbabweans their basic freedoms and human rights, including the right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country. I would like to emphasize that point again. The right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country is more than just a right. It is the very essence of good governance. And after 45 years of blundering from pillar to post, the people of Zimbabwe are desperate for stability, for good governance. This time, I think we should not take our eyes off the ball. We must push for good governance and not be allowed to be sidetracked by the likes of Comrade Gesa and his colleagues, who only want another musical chair. Is this normal? Kuti none of our generation vakarwa hondo utazakenda ku State House. That is nonsensical, in the sense that the war veterans were the ones who have kept Robert Mugabe and now Mnangagwa in power. And they did so by rigging elections. The idea that we should perpetuate the same dictatorship and get another one of their own choosing into power and hold the whole nation to ransom is an outrage. Thank you very much. Ben, do you want to give your closing remarks?
Yes, in closing, I would say, this battle is not ours. This is a battle where one is just looking for a replacement of the other. And we have seen how that has worked. The war veterans, they ousted Mugabe and they replaced him with Mnangagwa. One bad apple with another from the same basket. And they want to do exactly the same. It is not our battle. It is not our fight. Our fight, each and every one of us, our fight is to ensure that we restore good governance and find a democracy, free, fair, and credible elections, just like what the SADC report, the AU report, and other observer mission reports stated. We need to find democracy, and that way is the only way where we can actually choose a leader who is chosen by the people and is for the people. This battle here is, in Shona they say, kungotungana kwembudzi. They know each other. Don't now go and start choosing which side that you want. We have better things to do. We need to fix our country, and it can only be done through a democratic process. Thank you.
So my closing remark to Comrade Geza and his colleagues is that we are not interested in the war veterans imposing yet another dictator on the people of Zimbabwe. Let's restore the freedoms and basic human rights of all the citizens of Zimbabwe, including the right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country. Comrade Geza and his friends are free to nominate anyone they want to stand for president. But the final say on who goes to State House is for the people of Zimbabwe in a free, fair, and credible election. And no one, including Comrade Geza, can deny that what we have had the last 45 years was rigged elections. So the top priority is to change the system that has allowed dictators to stay in power for 45 years. That is the top priority. And his idea of retaining the same dictatorship only to swap one dictator for another is not on. It's totally unacceptable. We want to destroy the dictatorship and not just to replace one dictator with another. Thank you very much, those of you who were able to join us. Join us again tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock UK time, 8 o'clock Zimbabwean time. Good night.